It was a warm Friday afternoon in late May, and everything seemed to be lining up perfectly. I had just wrapped up a major project at work. My boss had actually praised me for once, and I had the whole weekend planned out for myself. After weeks of overtime and late nights, I was finally going to enjoy a quiet, stress-free weekend in my own space. I was planning to binge-watch a new sci-fi series, try a few recipes I'd bookmarked, and maybe even catch up on sleep. It was going to be glorious. My name is Rachel Turner. I live in a cozy two-bedroom apartment just outside of Denver, Colorado. It's nothing too fancy, but it's mine, and after a long week at my job as a graphic designer, it feels like a personal sanctuary. My cat, Jasper, had already claimed the couch as his throne, and my fridge was stocked with snacks, wine, and all the ingredients I needed for a weekend of culinary experiments. I even had a bubble bath scheduled for Saturday night. Everything was set. Just as I was putting the finishing touches on a chicken marinade, the doorbell rang. I paused, confused. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked at the time. It was just after 6 p.m. Who could it be? I wasn't dressed to receive company, sweatpants, no makeup, and my hair in a messy bun. Curious and slightly annoyed, I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked over to the door. When I opened it, I froze. Standing on the other side was my cousin Jason. I hadn't seen him in over 3 years. We'd grown up together in Indiana, but he'd moved to California a while back and we'd sort of drifted apart. We'd exchanged a few messages here and there, mostly holiday greetings, but nothing more. And now here he was, on my doorstep, with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a sheepish smile on his face. "Hey, Rachel," he said. Surprise. I blinked, still trying to process what I was seeing. "Jason, what are you doing here?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, sorry to just drop in. My flight got canceled, and I thought maybe I could crash here for the weekend." My brain went into overdrive. I wanted to be a good cousin, a good host, but this was my weekend, the one I had been counting down to for weeks. I looked at Jasper, who was now curiously peeking out from behind the couch, as if to say, "Who's this guy, and why is he messing with our plans?" I stepped aside and let Jason in. "Come in. We'll figure it out." He dropped his bag by the door and looked around. "Wow, your place is nice. Cozy." "Thanks," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "You want something to drink?" "Water's fine." I handed him a bottle and sat across from him on the edge of the recliner. "So, what happened to your flight?" He explained that he had been visiting some friends in Chicago and was supposed to fly back to San Diego, but a major storm had grounded his flight. He tried to book a hotel, but they were all full. Remembering that I lived nearby, he figured he'd try his luck. I sighed inwardly. Of course, he had no way of knowing that I had carefully planned this weekend as my personal retreat. Still, it wasn't like I could turn him away. "So, you'll just be here until Sunday?" I asked, trying not to sound too eager for an end date. "Yeah, if the flights are back up. I'll check tomorrow." And just like that, my weekend turned upside down. I had to shelve my TV plans since Jason didn't like sci-fi and insisted we watch crime dramas instead. He was one of those people who talked through the entire episode, pointing out plot holes and predicting the ending within the first 10 minutes. I tried to enjoy it, but it wasn't the same. I also had to adjust my meals since Jason was a vegetarian now, something I hadn't known. So the marinated chicken was out, and I had to whip up something meat-free with whatever ingredients I had left. By Saturday morning, I was already feeling the strain. Jason woke up early, way earlier than I had hoped, and decided to make pancakes. Except he used almond flour from the back of my pantry, which expired in 2023. I didn't have the heart to tell him, so I ate them and hoped for the best. Then he suggested we get out and explore. I didn't have the energy, but he was already halfway out the door with his camera, suggesting a hike in Boulder. Before I knew it, I was lacing up my sneakers and mentally bidding farewell to my bubble bath plans. Despite the early resistance, the hike turned out to be not so bad. The weather was beautiful, the trails weren't crowded, and Jason was surprisingly insightful. We talked more than we had in years. He told me about his job in digital marketing, his failed engagement last year, and his plan to take a few months off to travel. I found myself opening up too, sharing how burned out I'd been lately, how I sometimes felt invisible at work, and how lonely things got sometimes despite being surrounded by people. At one point, we stopped near a lookout spot, and he pulled out a small thermos of coffee he'd packed. We sat there in silence for a while, just taking in the view. It was peaceful. Unexpectedly peaceful. "Thanks for letting me crash," he said, his tone soft. "I know I kind of threw a wrench in your plans." I shrugged. "It's okay. Plans can be rearranged. I've missed this," he added. "Us talking like this." "Me too." We got back to the apartment around sunset, both tired but oddly content. I finally got to cook that veggie pasta I'd been planning for a different day, and we ate while listening to an old playlist we used to love as teens. It felt like we'd turned back the clock. Sunday morning came faster than I expected. Jason checked his flight status. It was back on. He'd be flying out in the afternoon. We didn't talk much as we had breakfast. There was something about the quiet that felt heavier than before. Maybe it was the realization that, as much as he disrupted my weekend, I wasn't entirely ready for him to leave. When we got to the airport, he gave me a long hug. "Let's not let another 3 years go by." "Agreed," I said, smiling. "Next time, just give me a little warning." He laughed. "Deal." As I drove back home, the silence in the car was deafening. My apartment felt bigger and emptier when I walked in. Jasper seemed a little confused, pacing around like he was looking for someone. I sat on the couch and finally turned on the sci-fi show I'd been saving. But halfway through the episode, I paused it and just stared at the screen. Funny how one unplanned visit could turn everything around. Not just my weekend, but maybe even the way I'd been looking at my life. Sometimes, the most unexpected guests bring the most meaningful surprises.